of the 169th session of the Queen's University of Belfast Literary and Scientific Society! It is so good to see those of you here this evening for our final debate before the Easter break and our penultimate one of the 169th session. It is especially good to see all of you after the momentous occasion that was our conversazione a mere 2 days ago. Good on all of you here for showing up after that wild night indeed. So, as all of you are well aware, the motion for tonight is not announced yet and will not be announced until after the reading of the minutes by our fine Mr. Secretary. So, to kick things off, we have a few announcements to get through. So, first of all, a sad one. Let's get the sad ones out of the way and move on to the good ones. And thankfully, oh good, I wonder if I have that on me. There's only the one sad one, which is, some of you may recall that a number of weeks ago I mentioned that we were going to be applying for the EDSU Awards this year. We did indeed. We applied for Event of the Year for the pub quiz that we organised for the gown, and we applied for Society of the Year for being the swell people that we are. We were successful in our nominations. We got through to the presentation round. We then were apparently good enough to get through to the shortlisting stage, but alas, I was informed today that we have not been successful in either. It is my pleasure to announce that we came second in one of them. I am not entirely sure which as of yet. The awards ceremony is taking place as we speak. But yes, alas, we have once again just barely missed success. I am sure that the 170th will change all of that and rewrite history. Yes, exactly. But nevertheless, on to good things now. I can't do the second one at the moment, so just a quick debrief. As I mentioned, this Tuesday, the 20th, was our annual conversazione, or formal, for those unaware. A mere 2 days late, the tickets have arrived, and I have distributed them to you. I do hope you will keep them as a lovely keepsake. It was a wonderful night, a fun time was had by all. Thank you very much to all those who have attended. I hope you enjoyed the evening, the reception, the dinner, and the after party in Berendal. So yes, thank you one and all to those of you who attended for making it the most successful one yet. Otherwise, I'll save that till last. Two quick ones. So, as I mentioned, this is our penultimate bit. We have one more left, but it is not for basically a month. It takes place on the 19th of April. The motion is this: House Believes the Republic of Ireland has sold out Northern Ireland. It is hopefully going to be our big finisher. We have already booked out and had confirmed the Great Hall. We are planning on having a large publicity push for it, so hopefully it will be fantastically well attended, and we plan on inviting some old members. And when I say old members, I mean properly old. I mean 60s, pre-disestablishment old. So hopefully it will be quite McCann. Yeah, possibly not Eamon McCann, but possibly Eamon McCann. We'll see. The other thing is just to note that we have one final special event left to us, which is the Maidens Competition. The Maidens is the national Irish competition for speakers in their first year of university debating. And Mr. Dufferin, President-elect, would you like to say a few words?
Well, now I couldn't go into details about all of the boring organisational stuff that I've done, but instead I believe it's much better that we extend our best wishes to those of us from Queen's who are competing over the weekend. So that will be Miss Inma Parati-Huertas and Mr. Russell Nairn and Mr. Edmund Doherty, who will be competing for us this weekend, so we can all wish them the best. Because I'm going to be very stressed for the next 3 days.
Excellent. And I found what I was looking for there. So we have just two announcements left. The next one is very brief, and then there's a very good one at the end. So just there was a thing that I wanted to do at the conversazione, which I unfortunately wasn't able to find time for. So I'd like to do it now. It was a little section called Apologies from Absent Friends, I sent an email out to our honorary elect members and asked them just to send me a line or no more than 2, just a message that they wanted to convey, and the entire point was that it would take no more than 2 minutes, and so it really won't. So if you'd indulge me, they are some very nice and they are some very valued members, so I didn't want to simply let their time and messages go to waste. So the first one was from the president from 2 years ago, Mary Louise, honorary elect member. Mary Louise said, "I hope you're all having a fantastic evening. Sad I can't be there celebrating the successes of this year. You've all made the society and its previous members very proud. See you soon. Kiss, kiss." From Julian Judge Rossa, HLM, I believe the internal convener of the 165th or 4th. If you could send my apologies, I would appreciate it. I'm especially filled with grief because I don't even have a particularly good excuse. Essentially, I just procrastinated myself into this position. I would resign my honorary elect membership in shame if I weren't so ridiculously attached to the idea of getting my shiny HLM card. I hope you're all enjoying the evening and that the Ulster Reform Club is still as pompously resplendent. Slant to the Queen. I sincerely hope that's still a thing in the litter and I haven't horribly offended anyone. The third one was from our guest chair from a few weeks ago, President Emeritus Tara Puriaha HLM. She said, "To my dearest Lituricans, my deepest condolences that we could not share this evening together. You being in awe of my presence, me desperately trying to pretend to be interested. Like if you cried, XOXO, gossip girl / Tara." 12th one, really that I should be doing last, but one came in at the very last moment that I wasn't expecting to receive, so we will save that for last. So the 12th one is from our eternal leader, President of the 163rd and refounder, Paul Shannon, HLM, and he said, "I would like to convey my sincere apologies to the President, Council and members of the Society that I cannot be present at the conversazione this evening. Drink and be merry, for tomorrow you'll have hangovers." It's just as applicable this evening as it was on Tuesday. And the final one, very special to me indeed, is from President Emeritus of the 165th session, Alan Kidd. Alan Kidd is a difficult man to get in contact with, and I received this message from him as I was in the taxi on the way to the Reform Club, barely minutes away, and he said, "Mr. President, sir, please accept my humble apologies for my absence. I am visiting my new employer, Cheltenham College, whose unfortunate pupils I shall be pretending to teach macroeconomics. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. Forever your humble and faithful servant, Adam." So there we go. If any of them end up listening to the recording, I thank you very much for your kind words and for taking the time. So the final announcement, and it's more an item of business than anything, is that I'm very pleased to announce that on the day of the conversazione, a mere few hours before the reception began, I had the great pleasure of meeting with friend of the Society, the Reverend Dr. Paul Bailey, who, as some of you may recall, was hospitalised due to a car accident a few weeks ago. I am very pleased to report that he's not fully recovered, but he is up and about, he's in good spirits, and he's now sporting a wonderful beard, which he informed me he's merely too lazy to shave off. We had a lovely chat, and the primary reason why I had wanted to meet with him a few weeks ago before his accident was that I had received the approval of Council to extend to him an offer. That being, simply put, a place on the Society Trust. There is a member of the Trust, if you will see once I give out the order papers, by the name of the Honourable Mr. Justice Bernard McCloskey. The Honourable Justice Bernard McCloskey was, I believe, one of the first people put on the Trust by the Eternal Leader Paul Shannon, and he was at the time the judge in residence at Queen's. However, work then took him abroad, and he is now, I believe, at another university in England. And so he has actually been uncontactable for the past few years, and as such is not, to put it bluntly, being of much use to the Society. And so I thought it would be good to, rather than just have a nice name on the letterhead, replace him with someone who would be useful, who is a friend to the Society, and has, I hope you will agree, a real love and affection for the Society. So I raised the proposition to the Reverend Doctor. He was humbled and very graciously expressed to me his interest. And so, as per the Constitution, I would now like to extend a motion to the floor. I will make it a joint motion. First of all, to honourably and politely remove the Honourable Mr. Justice Bernard McCloskey from the Trust. And secondly, to instate the Reverend Dr. Mr. Paul Bailey onto the Trust. would we like to have any discussion on this matter? Anyone? Mr. Clark?
What if I only want to be one then?
That's a fair point. Abstain. When in doubt, abstain. Anyone else like to say anything? Mr. Doherty?
Sorry, I just want you to clarify, how uncontactable has Mr. McCloskey been?
So the way the trust works is that they don't have a huge amount of responsibility or anything like that. Their main purpose is meant to be a sort of institutional memory, a data bank, where they meet with the Society Council twice a year. We give them a status report on what's been going on, and then they basically remember, give advice, and then whenever the new council comes in, one of the first things they have to do is meet with the trust in June. Pardon me, and then tell them about their plans for the year, and the trust will go, well, it sounds like a good idea. That's been tried in previous years. We won't have any luck, or maybe you should try it differently this time. That's the kind of thing they do. And so we have emailed the Honourable Mr. Justice Bernard McCloskey every year for the past 3-4, and we haven't even received a response. Never mind, it's sorry, can't make it. So yes, that is the extent of his uncontactability. Anything else? No. In that case, the motion is this House would remove the Honourable Justice Mr. Bernard McCloskey from the Literary Trust and would instead in his place the Reverend Dr. Paul Bailey. May I get a seconder?
Second.
All those in favour, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All those against say nay. Abstaining say meh. One nay, one meh, and the rest in favour. The motion carries. The motion carries. Can we please have a warm round of applause for our newest member of the Trust, the Reverend Dr. Paul Bailey? Shall be informed at the conclusion of this meeting. So, without further ado, to read the minutes of the 22nd Ordinary Meeting, I would bid you all welcome our current Technology Officer and Secretary-elect, Mr. Matthew Bradley, HLM!
Hecklers will be stared at. These are Peter Dunn's wonderful minutes. I can't take any credit for them, apart from the noise with which they're expressed. The 22nd Ordinary Meeting of the Literary and Scientific Society took place on the 15th of March 2018 and was attended by 83 members. This debate was co-hosted by the Law Society of Queens and Amnesty International QUB. Private members' business was started with Mr. Russell Mann. Sadly, the member has some sad news to bring to the House. His mother, Miss Teresa Donnelly, has suddenly become very ill with a condition that indeed resulted in her death. The House thus unanimously passed a motion to wish Miss Donnelly our best wishes for speedy recovery. External convener and President-to-be, Mr. Hugh Dobbin, brought up the issue of University College Cork's Philosophy Society's panel discussion on Repeal the 8th. He noted that they had invited 4/5 speakers representing the pro-choice argument and only 2 to represent pro-life side of the debate. And therefore, with those unrepresentative numbers, how could the Society claim to be encouraging fair and balanced debate? Dr. Craig Miller said it didn't matter if the 2 were better than the 5. Nice informative comment there, Craig. Mr. Russell Mann was highly critical of the decision. of the UEC Philosophy Society, claiming that they are in no way promoting meaningful debate. Our resident Cork homeboy, Mr. Ted Pine, said that admittedly this decision by the Society was questionable, but this should not overshadow the great work the Society does, particularly with the schools in the area. Honorary Life member, Mr. Matthew Sullivan, congratulations, asked the opinion of the House on the strange goings on in Salisbury. And while usually the most exciting thing to happen in that little quaint English city is a stolen scone, this matter, however, was more serious. The attempted, I can't read this in a funny voice. The attempted assassination of an ex-Russian spy through the use of a nerve agent, which Mr. Sullivan maintained was the first piece of chemical weapons used offensively since the Second World War. Mr. Jack Patton said we would have to bear in mind that any meaningful sanctions against Russia would have a direct impact on us. Mr. Jack Burke said that it was necessary to look carefully at the context of the situation rather than rushing to conclusions. In 2 contrasting responses, Mr. Robert Clark claimed that Russia needed to be sent a strong message, while Social Officer Mr. Colin Neal warned against hysteria before we knew of the exact relationship the nerve agent had to the Kremlin. President's questions were begun by a social officer to be Mr. Edmund Doherty. Keeping up with his reputation of speaking for far too long, he asked the President would he give his dad, Mr. Peter Doherty, an honorary fine and an honorary shame resign, as he called him a very nice person. The President, obviously bemused to why business was brought up, entertained Mr. Doherty and to agree to the fine and the shame resigns. So that happened. Mr. Russell then asked all of the Matthew Sullivans in the society, which did he think would still chew on the end of a lit cigar? The President really...
those photos.
No, I'm not going to send you second-hand photos. Of course, the President rarely concerns himself with Irish matters. He said he'd keep... Hang on. No, I've skipped very far forward. The President then went to embarrass the member in question, like we did there. Mr. Scarborough then asked if the President could be any amendment to the Irish Constitution, which would he be? Of course, the President rarely concerns himself with Irish matters, but he said he'd be the fourth amendment, whatever that is. Treasurer Mr. John MacDonald kept up the in-joke of the Kardashian question.
Shame.
By asking the President what would he bring to his perfect date and what would he do with the Kardashian. As apparently one of the Kardashians said something about it on Twitter. The President replied that he would take Rob, as it was determined that he was most like the President and showed this witty, that's double-sided. Shot a good time, seduce him, but leave him wanting more, and give him a kiss upon the hand as he left. Just let that sink in. Our life member, Mr. Finbar Rogers, said polyamorous relationships are quite fashionable these days, so sure it would be best to take all of the Kardashians on a date and then throw them off the cliffs of Moher to rid the world of this great evil. The President, of course, saw this as a fine course of action. A vote was taken on prior opinion on the motion. This House would repeal the 8th, which read 48 in favour, 15 against, and 5 abstentions. Opening the debate for the proposition was Maiden Speaker Miss Sarah Sonner, who is also the Women's Officer of the Students' Union.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay.
Sorry.
I need to get back to dealing with heckles. I'm no Jimmy Carroll. Starting her speech, she pleaded for the House to bear in mind that this wasn't just an issue for women.
Order!
Thank you very much. But also the intersex and male trans community, and thus activism without taking this into account wasn't activism at all. She maintained that it was not only a debate of morality, but simply one of bodily autonomy. The 8th Amendment was fundamentally a classist piece of legislation that did not sub-abortion, but merely export the matter. Opening the case for the opposition was treasured to be Mr. Shea Glasgow, who before starting his argument admitted that this was a debate of a difficult and divisive nature, concerning the intimate condition of human experience. The core of his argument centred around the notion that the unborn child should not be deprived of the same rights as a born child, and thus should be treated with the same level of respect and dignity. Continuing the argument for the proposition was the social media events and advertising manager for Amnesty QUB, Miss Megan Gethin, who was also a maiden speaker. Abortion is a medical issue, rather than one which should revolve around law, the state or the church, she maintained. Miss Gethin stood proudly in the proposition, and as a Sligo gal, she's also stood proudly as an Irish woman. However, she argued that the failing of her country to enact these rights makes her embarrassed and failed by Ireland. Continuing the argument for the proposition was Mr. Duke Perry, who started his speech by saying that Ireland has come to stand for certain values, including freedom, respect and dignity, with a little asterisk beside that. By repealing the 8th Amendment, Ireland would not be standing true to such values. He then went on to discuss that the Citizens' Assembly in which the issue was discussed was not representative of the Irish population. He then concluded by stating that these are not cells that are being discussed, but human beings, and they should be treated as such. Third up for the proposition was Maiden Speaker, Miss Gráinne Graham. She claimed that the issue of abortion should not concern anybody apart from the particular woman involved. Even if she, for example, didn't want an abortion, she shouldn't have any say over anybody else, as it's not her body or her choice. No woman, she maintained, is a vessel or a source of reproduction, and thus concluded by stating, "We won't wait to repeal the 8th. Third for the proposition was Dr. Craig Miller, who, surprise, surprise, took the medical slant of the motion. He clearly defined the differences of miscarriage and abortion, and as he claimed the proposition had confused the two. He then looked at the lack of education on the matter, the issue of the lack of sufficiently trained doctors in Ireland to undertake the procedure, and the apparent link with depression. Rounding off the proposition was our fourth maiden speaker, Miss Eilish Lee. She argued that the core argument of the proposition was respect for women, and thus their right to make their own choices regarding bodily autonomy. A man has a choice, she argued, to support the child or not, so why should women have a choice too? She reiterated the points of her previous speakers, declaring clearly that this was clearly an issue of rights and that Ireland should catch up with the rest of the world. She also quipped that no man's penis is that fantastic, which Mr. Dunn thought needed mentioning. President-to-be of the Law Society, Mr. Morgan Hickman, closed the debate for the opposition. He claimed that the proposition was clearly pro-abortion rather than pro-choice. In contrary to the proposition's claims, he said this could not merely be a debate based on medical factors, as the right to life is a much more complex debate than that would suggest. He argued that the Eighth Amendment gives a sufficient balance between the right of the mother and the child, and was thus very happy to propose the motion. Questions were heard from Miss Lily Vetter, Miss Emma Chadwick, Mr. Cormac Gibbon, Miss Hannah Hardy, Mr. Ted Pine, Miss Mary Kate Dobbin, Mr. Hugh Dobbin, and Miss Lucy Kelly. A vote was then taken on speakerability, which read 27 for the proposition, 30 for the opposition, and 14 abstentions. May I take the minutes as read?
Nay.
Okay, I
There you go.
Okay, so I'll have you know that it's not Dr. Craig Miller. I think in this house we were using correct titles. As of today, it is Dr. Craig Miller.
I think it could be your one.
No, I got it. I'll go first. So, just a very brief note. You mentioned a question was heard from Miss Emma Chadwick. That would be incorrect. It was heard from Miss Emma Chadwick, HLM. If you want to give their proper names, I would ask you to ensure that Mr. Secretary amends that policy in his minutes.
This might sound like suicide, but the question by Mr. Hugh Dobbin was rejected by President Calvin Black.
Was it? What was the question? What was the question?
It was abstaining one. Was
Oh yeah,
Yes, that's right.
question to each side.
Oh, I didn't permit him to ask that question. So
Okay.
I can be stricken from the record as well. Also, a very quick note. There was the thing about the Shin resigned, honorary Shin resigned and public report. What, can you just quickly check that? Because
It never actually said Eamon McCann.
yes, that was towards Eamon McCann, or his
It
father.
was me,
Yes.
which is what that suggests.
Yes, we will correct it later. Otherwise,
I've never had the experience of being a human shield. I feel like one.
unless there's anything else, can we, Mr. Clark?
While we're on the point of nitpicking, my point wasn't that we need to send a strong message to Russia. It was that Russia were trying to send a strong message.
There we go. There it is. Many things to be corrected. If there's nothing else, can we take the...
No, nothing else. That's it.
There's never been a case of this many mistakes in minutes. As such, I propose a motion, please reject it, that we should be rereading them next week.
Oh, well, I mean, we can pass a motion compelling the Secretary to reread them next week, and seeing as how there's no meeting next week, he'll just have to get it in the bathroom straight in the chair. Can I get a seconder for that motion? Yes, the motion is the Secretary must reread the minutes in his bathroom mirror next week. All those in favour say aye!
There was something about going on the productions of the cliff. That was rejected. I had put in order to remove that because Kanye West is running for president in 2024.
I don't know. Personally, I will. Unless there's anything else, can we take the minutes to be amended but then read?
Aye.
Excellent, thank you very much. Mr. Royston, if you could come to there, please. Mr. Secretary, if you could remain on your feet. I shall give you no. Right, so, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to announce the motion for this evening. No one in this room besides the Secretary, the Secretary-elect, the internal committee-elect, and the President going knows the motion, not even the speakers. The speakers will have 15 minutes to prepare their arguments from the moment they exit the room, which should be just as soon as I announce the motion. And so,
Can I just quickly, before you go any further, just bear in mind, speakers, this is BP format. You are working as a pair, so work with your partners. because
we have partners.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
the person
a
sitting
team.
next to you, that's your partner, because we will be judging you on that, and I want you to make sure that you do, okay? Thank you.
And so, the motion for the annual Dufferin Competition for Speaker of the Year this year is: this House believes Antifa are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. Speakers, if you could please an order paper and vacate the room. You will have 15 minutes from the time the last of you leaves the room. Please vacate now. Stand, start moving, make sure you've got an order paper so you know the motion. You will have 15 minutes. Do not go too far. Ideally set your own timer. Opposition, please. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the time starts now. So, as per usual, we move on to private members' business, President's questions, and a vote on prior opinion. There will also be a brief introductory address explaining the nature of this particular debate. All of this must take place in only 15 minutes, so let's get going. Are there any private members' business for this evening? Mr. MacDonald, Treasurer.
I've got some fantastic news for the House.
Yes.
I was going to bring this up last week, but I just didn't get the chance. The spring statement: growth revised up, inflation on target, wages set to rise in real terms, borrowing as a percentage of GDP fallen for the first time in 17 years. It's actually going fantastically for the economy. Can we, this House, implore the opposition to stop predicting gloom and doom and to support the government in their economy?
No,
this is their economy.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr. MacDonald. Did anybody care to comment on that motion? I see a hand shoot up once from Mr. O'Neill, social officer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think if we actually had finished that by saying the Remainers doom and gloom is actually untrue, if it had been about Brexit, then may have supported them in this.
Can
I'm
we
saying this strictly about it. Yeah, so if it was about Brexit, fair enough, the Remainers and owners have been proven wrong, and so have a lot of the big bank establishment. However, with regard to the economy, it's the first fall in debt after 17 years or whatever. Like, that's not great. I think after some amount of years, debt will fall under any government. And so you've been in for a lot of years now, and it's obviously going to happen whether it goes to return. So,
Dr. Miller, take the floor. Doctor.
The Tory government took over 150 billion pounds of debt or deficit per year. It's now in the region of about 30 to 40 a year. Right, so yeah, with the actual growth that's also occurred at the same time as the cuts that have made, we can argue that those cuts may or may not be unfair. That's a different debate, okay? But this is about how well the economy is doing and not how well the cuts have affected people. And as a result of that, the actual cuts that have been made have resulted in a real-time debt fall compared to GDP. That's not happened before. So you say 17 years later, this government's only been in for, what, 7? And as such, this is actually phenomenal. It's a brilliant economy. It's a brilliant work that the Chancellor has done. It's the first time we can actually say, well done to a Chancellor of the Exchequer. You have left us in a better position than you started with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howell.
First, I would say, which Chancellor is this? Is this the infamous?
It's so
But this is an economy like was. Debt has come down. Personal debt has risen massively in the last 7 years. Households are now footing the bill that councils and government should be footing. More people now are living in extreme poverty than in my living memory in the last 30 years. This is. It's a different question. This government has cut the public debt and sacrificed people's real life standards for the case of an incredibly small amount of economic gain, which actually hasn't made that much difference.
Miss Liliana Vetter, HLN Training
It's a
Officer.
nice try.
Yes, I did try.
I kind of reiterate Chris's point in the sense that
although this is wonderful, our economy is getting supposedly back on track, but I don't know about anyone else in this room, but I've had less faith in the government than any other government in my lifetime. Simply like,
Fake news.
no, you two don't count, you big Tories. I know, or like morale is down, people don't support May, like she's just a rubbish character, she's not good for your head.
We are on a very tight time restriction, so Mr. Donald, if you'd like to finish it up.
Well, as I corrected the Guardian article last week, the Gini coefficient that measures inequality in the UK has gone down from its lowest point in 30 years. There's nothing more to say than that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Donald. I really, there's only 10 minutes left, so. Are there any other private members' business?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Dr. Miller.
Can I amalgamate? What, Chris, great point. Well,
This will be kept brief, anyway.
Okay, that's. Can we sit down now? Okay. The second point is regarding the saluting dog.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone's been a fan of the saluting dog.
Yes.
But and I don't want to say what was said just in case I get into trouble with the lack of free speech. But that what was said, I found actually quite disturbing. I say that as somebody that's Jewish, and I say that as I say that I found.
Sorry, I just got it.
No, I found it very disturbing to watch. However, there is absolutely no reason for that to result in a criminal conviction. I support the right to free speech, even if I find it sickening what he said. Okay? The two things are completely different. So I'd like to say, I do not think people can stand up and go, that was not offensive. It was. Okay? And there isn't one person who I've shown the video to from my community who would say otherwise. However, that is completely different to resulting in a criminal conviction for basically free speech. Okay? So I'd just like the 2 points to be discussed.
Can I ask, does everyone in the House know what was being referred to there? No? Is it? So yeah, so just very briefly, in 2016, a Scottish YouTuber / comedian basically took his girlfriend's pet dog, which was a pug, who, in her own words, is like the most adorable, cutest thing she had ever seen. And as he says, as he claims, as a joke, he tried to turn it into the least cute and least adorable thing he could think of, which was a Nazi. And so he made a video in which it showed him making the dog watch some of Hitler's speeches, as well as making the dog do a Nazi salute. And again, he claims this was for the purpose of comedy and whatnot, and his entire point was, again, Nazis are not adorable, yada yada yada. But about 5 days or so after that, he was then arrested, again in Scotland, for hate speech, I believe. And then this court case has been drawn out over the past 2 years, kept getting knocked back, with regards to like time extensions. And then just, I believe, on Tuesday, he was found guilty of hate speech and is due to be sentenced. So, any thoughts on the matter? I'll go with Mr. Nairn.
Whilst this is very, very clearly an example of edgelord humour in its worst case, and I would definitely agree with Dr. Miller in that it is ridiculous that somebody has been criminally charged for what essentially amounts to them turning a dog into a fascist. An act which, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to turn a dog into a fascist, but it's very difficult, and he clearly did not manage it, and even then his joke was just not that funny, really.
Thank you very much, Mr. Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with what they said. I don't think he should have been jailed, and I think this has been really interesting. I'm a big believer in free speech, but I think also there's a limit, which I hate that there is. But I think there does have to be. I think we do live in this nice part of the world that doesn't really have that much of that going on. Maybe Craig, you could argue differently in some parts of London, things like that. However, there are hate speech laws for a reason, and we never really come in contact with them because of how mono-ethnic our culture is, but we should always remember that, and remember there's a lot of people who are stereotyped by certain words.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Neill. Mr. Doherty?
It's funny, actually, I only found out about this a few hours ago because I saw David Baddiel talking about it, and I will basically just repeat what David Baddiel said, given how he is also a comedian, he is also Jewish. He basically said that you should never be prevented from making jokes about Nazism or the Holocaust, because often they can be the best jokes possible. just because this was a terrible joke does not mean that it should have been silenced.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darby. Mr. Bradley?
I wouldn't say it's because it was a terrible joke at all. I'm not sure he was convicted for telling him it's a bad joke, because I would have been in jail years ago. But I think it does set quite a dangerous precedent if you remove the supposedly comedic side. You know, if you look back in history, a lot of social change and movements have been put forward by art and like artistic movements and films and things. So I think it is worrying that people are able to be criminalised for that. If it is just like, I know it's not something you want to be spread at all. But at the same time, it depends on who is setting what is acceptable. What if it gets to a stage where that is what is acceptable, and you know the nice beliefs we hold true are now unacceptable, and to me it just sets a dangerous precedent. It wasn't targeted at anybody. It was put in a public place, which is why I think it could be justifiable. But apart from that, I think it is definitely trampling on free speech. Even though most of the time when I hear people talk about free speech, it is just asking for their right to be a dick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bradley and John. Final point from Dr. Miller before you start. A question that I wanted to ask you. Obviously, Nazi can't do anything about that. It is anti-Semitic, of course. But was the video anti-Semitic? Do you know what I mean? Was he trying to be anti-Semitic in your opinion? You know,
So, in my opinion, and the people I've shown the video to, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The particular phrase he used is probably the most worrying thing.
Right.
Okay, this wasn't. He was trying to he used a couple of different phrases. One was from the people I've shown it less bad than the other. Less bad. From my perspective, I think Bradley's hit the nail on the head directly, and we've talked about this around our table. That in terms of cartoons were used as a propaganda tool during Nazi Germany, and this is edging towards that. I mean, it's not there at all, okay, it isn't. And he has at least attempted to justify his actions in the video. He's just got it completely and utterly wrong. He's attempted to be funny and failed miserably and pissed off a lot of people. I hate any restrictions on free speech. I disagree with you in that if somebody wants to be a dick, let them, okay? It's up to them. Okay? No, I understand. But to me, there shouldn't be a restriction on that, right? And that's the bit I'm more pissed off about than what he's done. Oh, I think what he's done is awful, okay? I'm not defending that. It's the fact that then the court has decided that this is the line of what you can and can't say. He's not incited hatred or violence towards anybody. He's just been an awful person, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry we do have to move on. So, one president's question. Mr. Patton.
Just wondering, Mr. President, what do you think of the response of the Rick and Morty fan base to the potential and then non-potential, based on the tweet of one of the co-creators, that there may not be a fourth season?
In a single word, to keep things brief, justified. Moving on, as again, we have 2.5 minutes before the speeches need to begin. A very quick vote on prior opinion. So, the motion this evening, as we know, is this House Believes Antifa, or Antifa, however you want to pronounce it, are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. I shall actually, we'll do the introductory address briefly because I was going to discuss what Antifa are, because a lot of people don't know. So, as all of you should hopefully be aware, this is the Dufferin Competition for Speaker of the Year. This is the most prestigious inter-competition that the Society runs, and it is the most prestigious award. Arguably, there's a lot of awards that we call the most prestigious that the Society gives out, but very much it is the most prestigious award for speakers, let's say. Previous winners include last year Dr. Craig Miller, I believe Mo Musa won. Is anyone here long enough to remember? Did Mo win? And honestly, I can't really remember any further back than that. Our records are pretty terrible. Harry Adair, who was the Conversazione and spoke a few weeks ago, won the Dufferin. And
didn't Kervin van Blanken win one of those two?
Yes, Karen did win. Karen must have won 167. So a fellow who was with his sister a single year in the 167, called Karen van Blanken, won then. So yes, quite a prestigious award. Our judges this evening, As I mentioned, Dr. Craig Miller, winner of the Dufferin Competition in the 168th session. On the right there, we have, of course, Mr. Russell Nairn. Also, Dr. Craig Miller is Treasurer Emeritus of the 167th session and Open Representative Emeritus of the 168th. Mr. Russell Nairn is obviously Treasurer-elect. Oh, sorry, Training Officer-elect. Forget the TR, change the same thing. Of the 170th session and is our first Irish Times finalist since 2013. And in the middle, presently fetching the debaters for this evening is Miss Liliana Vedder, HLM, Outreach Officer Emeritus of the 167th, Interim Convener Emeritus of the 168th. Hello, speakers. And of course, this year's Training Officer. And so, we'll applaud them once Lily's back with us. Just very briefly, for those of you who don't know what Antifa is, from the prestigious and well-reputed source of Wikipedia, the Antifa movement is a conglomeration of autonomous, self-styled anti-fascist groups in the United States. The principal feature of Antifa groups is their opposition to fascism through the direct action or the use of direct action. They engage in militant protest tactics, which has included property damage and physical violence. They tend to be anti-capitalist, and they are predominantly far-left and militant-left, which includes anarchists, communists, and socialists. Their stated focus is on fighting far-right and white supremacy ideologies directly, rather than politically. So there you go. A quick round of applause for our judges for this evening. Very much. As I honestly can't remember now if I mentioned, I don't think I did. So this competition is called the Dufferin Competition, named after Lord Dufferin, a lord from a long, long time ago. Near the foundation of the society, he presented us with a medal in his name, the Dufferin Medal, which was meant to be awarded to winners of this competition. However, within about 3 weeks of him awarding it to the society, it was stolen and went missing and has never been seen since. I believe another one was made and given to the society, and it too was also lost. So, completely unprompted, unsolicited, of his own volition, during my meeting with the Reverend Dr. Paul Bailey on Tuesday, he actually informed me that he intends to contact Queen's and see if they have any kind of offering available in the form of a medal, which is more fancy, shall we say, than what is available in the gift shop. And if they do, ideally, he said something silver plated or whatnot, he will purchase it on behalf of the society and give it to us to be awarded to the winner of the Dufferin Competition. So the winner tonight will not be receiving anything, as is tradition anyway. However, with any luck, they will hopefully receive the first Dufferin medal that the society has had in a long, long time. So, quick round of applause then for the judges. Did we do that?
Yeah. Actually, do it again. Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think there's anything. Lily, so, previous Dufferin winners include Craig, Mo Musa, Karen, Harry. Do we remember any of it?
No, I don't think.
No, okay. That. Fine.
No, sorry. I'm not speaking, it doesn't count.
You're in the room.
Mo was also in the Irish Times final.
Yes, semi-final. No, he only did semi-final.
Was he semis?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was last year.
Russell's the first
Oh, you
finalist
got it.
ever.
First, no, since I'm a kid, 5 years ago. So very quickly then, the vote on prior opinion. Again, you don't need your round cards for this. So, the motion is this House believes Antifa are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mr. Secretary. All those who would oppose the motion, please raise your hand and say nay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. And all those who have no particular feelings on the motion, who wish to abstain, please raise your hand and say nay. 1, 2, judges.
Abstaining is
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Excellent. Mr. Secretary, please read back the vote.
Okay. On the vote of prior my opinion, it was 5 votes for the motion, 9 votes against the motion, and 13 abstentions.
So there we go.
Everyone goes meh.
Yes, they do indeed. So, without any further ado, to open the debate and the case for the proposition, I welcome our first speaker for this evening, Miss Imna Roddy Porter!
Good evening, members of the House, judges, and whoever is here again. First of all, I'm going to start this motion. This House believes Antifa are more dangerous than white nationalist movements, based on our current and past situation about these movements. And we live in a world that is currently broken. It's broken, and not only in America. It's broken in Europe as well. And obviously, when a world is broken into kind of movements, we have this kind of danger situation that we're dealing with right now. So when we're talking about anti-movements, we're talking about people that are actually against fascism, which is per se a violent movement. But the thing is that they are not, when they are against fascism, they're not using this kind of, let's say, movement for making it a good thing. So that's one keyword I want to make clear. And when we're talking about white nationalist movements, we're talking about people that they saw that their current situation is being in danger because of the status quo that I was talking before. And what we have to do in this side of the House to make clear that Antifas are more dangerous than white nationalist movements, it's explain why Antifas are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. And this is where this side of the House has specifically 3 main arguments to explain this. The first one is the tactics that they're using. The tactics that Antifas are using, it's a direct way of destruction. It's a direct way of destruction within within all the symbology that it's fascist, with all the people that is actually can wear that symbology. And with the tactics, I'm going to bring an example of my country, obviously Spain, a very good country known by the dictatorship and the fascist movement that was around there. I once went to Antifa meeting, an Antifa movement, and they were actually saying that they should kick everyone that's wearing a flag of Spain in their wrist, just because it was representing Franco symbology, which is actually not true if we get our critical thinking out here. So first of all, the tactics that they're using, the white movements, the white national movements, we're talking about movements here, which I'm going to explain more in the long term in my speech. So when we're talking about a movement, and this is our second argument, we're not talking about individual cases. We're talking about a whole group of people who are actually moving for a certain reason. Within the Antifas movement, we have a lot of different groups, a lot of different people, but the aim is actually the same: the destruction of the fascist movement with the use of force as well. So, with the white nationalist movement, in individual cases, we can see a lot of white nationalist people that have done that, and they're actually wrong because morals, whatever. But the case is that white nationalist movements are not more dangerous. Why? Because they're actually moving. They're actually moving because they lost privilege, not because they want to fight a violent movement with violence. So that goes into our third main argument, and it's the short and long-term impact that the Antifa movements have and the white nationalist movement don't have. In the short and long-term impact, when we're talking about a short impact, we're talking about how the movement itself grows, now the movement itself kind of develops within the society. The Antifa's movements are actually named terrorist groups in the United States of America because of all the things that they were doing within the society. The white nationalist movement, on the other hand, it doesn't have. So the short and long-term impact, it's kind of different because of the tactics that I explained beforehand. And they use directly way destruction. And in the long-term impact, that actually doesn't help the movement at all. That's why they're more dangerous. Because if we were talking about a group that actually wants to fight against fascism, that would be great, that would be awesome. But it's not the point. They are not using this ideology for fighting against fascism. On the other hand, they're using the force for fighting against a movement that is fascism, that is actually corrupted by the use of force. So it doesn't make sense at all. When I was talking about the current and past situation, I wanted to explain that right now, because when we talk about the past situation, we can actually see that the Antifas and the white nationalist movement, it's not something that is actually current, it's something that happened in the past years. It's something that happened in Europe, it's something that happened in America. And when we're talking especially about Europe, we see a lot of influence about the Antifas movement within the society that they were developing, and how they had a very bad impact in how the fascist movement and how the fascist movement was controlled. All of us can agree that, or if you don't agree, we can talk about that later, but all of us can agree that the fascist movement, it's a bad thing. So if you want to fight a bad thing, you don't actually use another destruction weapon to just fight against it. The point that I'm taking out of here is just like, along the debate, we're going to explain with more depth why the Antifas are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. And it's only because, first of all, the tactics. As I say, the tactics are very different, and the tactics of the Antifas that have a direct way of destruction. Meanwhile, the white nationalist movements, they don't have this. Second of all, the short and long-term impact. With a short and long-term impact, we're talking about how the Antifa movement developed. It's how they can affect the movement that they are, let's say, battling against. And the third of all, we're talking about a movement, we're not talking about individual people, and we could say that this is our main core about it. We're not talking about individuals, we're talking about movements. And in this case, the Antifas movements are more dangerous than white nationalist movements. Thank you very much.
Madam Prime Minister, I neglected to mention that the Dufferin Competition runs under the format of British parliamentary style, and so we give the speakers fancy titles and little else changes. So, now to continue the case for the opposition, I will welcome the leader of the opposition for this evening, Ms. Kerswell.
So I would like to begin, thank you to the proposition for fighting against us, and to the House and to the various members of the Council. Now, I would like to start off with making sure that the House actually can understand what we're talking about when we're saying white nationalist movements. Because we are talking about the alt-right, but we are also talking about a very dangerous group called the neo-Nazis. And that's what we need to consider here. Now, the first prop said that, yes, Antifa use bad methods, but we need to think about the neo-Nazis here. Obviously, they have used terrible methods in the past against a far wider group of people than Antifa ever went near. And that's what we need to consider here. We need to consider the difference between the ideological perspectives of the two groups. Now, Antifa are against fascism, which I think is a generally good thing, because fascism generally has not done well in our society. And I don't
On that point,
Go.
While Antifa claims to be against fascism, their methods are inherently fascist. In fact, they're more evocative of a leftist version of Hitler's brown shirts than anything else.
I take your point, but then again, you need to think about what the actual aims are. We can't think about Antifa as being they do use bad methods, but as our side is going to argue, they've actually done some good as well. And now we're going to, and then we have to think about again the alt-right and the neo-Nazi movement, who at the end of the day just think of the neo-Nazis, for example, think that white people are the supreme race, that anyone else shouldn't be there. And I personally think if you compare between the against fascism and against everyone that's not white, I think we need to consider these two ideological perspectives. On that point? No, thank you. And now I'm going to move on to something that happened with the white nationalist movement, in which they actually tried to, they're on Twitter, and they wanted to discredit Antifa and basically make them out to be a racist, sexist organisation, where they actually pretended to be Antifa and went around with the hashtag punch white women. And they actually attacked Antifa by trying to paint this picture of them as these people who, when they actually didn't do anything. Go on.
I seem to recall that being very, very similar to a movement, let's all punch a Nazi.
Fair enough. The proposition is going to argue, Antifa are not perfect. But as the proposition, we are arguing that the neo-Nazis and the alt-right are far worse because of their beliefs and their inherent hatred towards the majority of people who just aren't them. And
No, thank that.
no, thank you. And yet, that's basically what we need to think about here. Antifa, who are basically against fascism, which inherently has not done much good in our society, and has killed millions of people in our society. And this is against the alt-right move, the alt-right movement, neo-Nazis, who basically just think that anyone but them is bad. So
Thank you very much, Ms. Swell, Leader of the Opposition. I will just take this to the front, and then I will introduce the next speaker.
Careful.
So, to continue the case for the proposition, I would invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case, Mr. Kieran Gallagher, HLM.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If I had known actually that this was going to be really parliamentary, I probably would have not gone for Deputy Prime Minister, because that essentially puts me down as Jeffrey Donaldson or Nigel Dawes. But never mind. So basically, it is the purpose for me basically is to back up the Prime Minister and what was said, and to attack as courtly as possible what the Leader of the Opposition said. But unfortunately, I don't think the Leader of the Opposition gave us much to attack. So basically, I'll start off. Inma did say, more or less, that violence begets violence. That's one of the main issues that we have on this side of the House with Antifa. They are deluding themselves into a state where an anti-fascist group, that so they are called, are becoming more and more fascist by the day, and have been since the early 20th century when the anti-fascist movement began. And basically, this is one of the core problems. They claim to be anti-fascist, and yet they walk around in anonymity. They do not tell us. They do not come out with their own identities, either of their leaders or their core membership. And they are the ones who are roaming around the streets in their thousands, causing considerable damage to property, stalking and attacking physically not just their opponents, but independent journalists, but bipartisan and apartisan in that sense, and law enforcement. At least on this continent, and very much so on one on the other side of the Atlantic as well. So, I think the main points I wanted to bring up are, if we are to say that they are worse than white nationalists, I think a couple of points need to be made. One, white nationalists do not tend to wear masks across their face or balaclavas. They do not attempt to silence debate either. They are at least open to this debate, whereas... okay, go ahead.
So that is because the white nationalist movement usually has much more of a direct voice in terms of power structure, in terms of that white nationalism has been much less officially repressed by state power than certain leftist movements or certain resistance movements to fascism.
I'm not sure I quite understood that point. Can you clarify exactly how you think?
So in terms of, if you look at white nationalism, the first speaker said about how Antifa is now a terrorist group. Yeah, I can think of at least one white nationalist group in America responsible for thousands of deaths, which has never been prescribed as a terrorist organisation, simply for their privilege of being both property and white.
I unfortunately, I don't want to start back and forth, but I unfortunately don't recognise exactly who you're talking about. If we're referring to Nazis, which is what I suspect you're talking about, neo-Nazis and Nazis, thankfully, are not quite the same thing. Disgusting as no doubt their intentions and their aims are, white nationalists at least tend to admit that they are racist. They admit that they are xenophobic, anti-Semitic, all of these things. They do not at least delude themselves into saying that they aren't, by and large. And I think there was a problem as well brought up by the leader of the opposition that we call the alt-right the same thing as white nationalists. They can't. Alt-right is far too ambiguous a term. And I think one of the big problems with the media at the moment is that any sort of conservative view is mixed in along with white nationalism, so it inflates the numbers. White nationalists, as people who do genuinely believe in white supremacy and will admit to it, are a far smaller number than the black blocs we saw in Hamburg, for example, in the G20. Streets absolutely chock-a-blocked with masked, black-clad people who were stalking, for example, various journalists from all across the globe who were either from the left wing or the right. I'll give you the example to prove the point I'm trying to make here. Take Lauren Southern, who reports for Rebel Media, a Canadian. Fair enough, we can call her a slightly more right-wing, slightly more conservative journalist and commentator. On both sides of the Atlantic, has been stalked, has been attacked, and also people who have merely been photographed alongside her, with whom she has no association whatsoever, were stalked in and out of the streets in Hamburg, for example, had urine thrown at them, had equipment stolen from them, were bloodied and bruised, and actually had to receive medical treatment after their encounters with them. And this is one of the big problems as well. People are so afraid that of repeating the mistakes of the triumphant fascist right in Europe in the middle of the last century, that we are almost too sympathetic to something that is almost equally as bad on the left wing. Fascism is not an exclusive phenomenon of the right wing. It can and has existed in the left wing, and it is now, and it is called Antifa. As I was going over my points earlier, they do not wear masks and remain anonymous. They do not attempt to silence debate. They have not turned out in their thousands attacking opponents, journalists, and law enforcement. They are not lying to themselves about the nature of... white nationalists are not lying to themselves about the nature of their views and aims, and white nationalists are not generally sympathised in the mainstream media. The other thing to note is this. As Imran rightly said, violence begets violence, and division begets division. One of the reasons we might be seeing more white nationalists coming out of the closet year on year recently is precisely because we can't have that debate where no doubt we would absolutely thrash them. White nationalism is a bad ideology, and if we could only get them out of the closet more and shine the light on it, we would have much less of a problem. But no, instead, we are deciding to silence them and punch them, and this is our problem. Antifa is a catalyst for violence from both sides. Do not forget that. I beg you to support this motion. Thank you.
Prime Minister, and now to continue the case for the opposition, I invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, President-elect Mr. Hugh Dufferin.
I'm rather upset tonight because this could possibly be, as long as what I'm planning goes ahead, that this will be the last time I give a 7-minute speech to this House. But on to the debate. What a world it is we live in. Who's worse than the Nazis? It's what we're debating here tonight. And we have all been raised on the belief that Nazis were pretty much the baddies. And I'm using the term Nazis, not white nationalists, specifically in my protected minute because I have no qualms conflating the two terms. Because whenever Inma, as she says in her speech, wants us to focus not on individuals, but on movements, it becomes very clear what the white nationalist movement is, and it is a movement of Nazis, of people who believe that they, as members of the white race, are superior to those of other ethnic groups, those of other races, and that they would rather that they are stamped out. That is what the mainstream white nationalist Mr. Beckett.
Richard Spencer, who is a recognised leader of the white nationalist movement, has actually publicly advocated for a black ethno-state as well, because he has specifically said that violence is not the answer. The current white nationalist movement, as horrific as they are, advocates for peaceful moving on of people. Antifa advocates for direct, aggressive violence.
The peaceful creation of a black ethno-state. If this is what the white nationalist movement is for, then we have to talk in philosophical terms as well, not merely in that which is done in riots and property damage, and assess on a philosophical level and the way in which it impacts wider society what is more harmful. In a POI he gave, Matthew Sullivan compared Antifa and certain sects of it to those of the brown shirts. Vast swathes of the white nationalist movements are literally wish they could be the brown shirts. Now, it's important, and this is what I'm going to focus on, is the philosophical and cultural impact of what Antifa are versus that of what the white nationalist movement is. And it's about assessing what the goals of the organisation are and what impact that's going to have on wider society and what acts that's going to inspire. And we've got to ask, when people follow these ideologies, what are the results? And I'm talking about the people in society who just follow these ideas by proxy. Not the people who riot in the streets, not the people who wear the balaclavas or the ridiculous looking white cone hats, but all those who are influenced by it. And those, in my eyes, are the people who are actually more important, because those are the people who are being convinced. Those are the people who are more essential than those already rioting to either organisation achieving its eventual goals. What does it mean when someone follows a white nationalist ideology? It inspires positive acts against others from factors that are only skin deep. It inspires those that they see a black person or a Hispanic person or those who are not of the very specific set of people that the white nationalist movement tells them are superior enough or adequate enough to be a part of their future of the world, that it inspires positive acts against those people to deny them of their rights and to make them the second-class citizens. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. I'm going to come at this point and shout and beam down straight away. So you talked about skin deep factors, cultural factors. People want a white ethno state because that's where they feel like they belong. So you talk about that being such a bad thing for that cultural belonging, but the likes of Antifa will sit there and just for a mere ideology will hate you and will attack you and force you down for that.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that Antifa are a perfect organisation. I'm not a personal fan of the organisation because I don't believe it has the proper level of organisation or a proper structure or a unified message that it can properly achieve its goals that it has. But we're not here to debate who we think has a better vision for the future. We're here to debate who we think is more dangerous. And to me, it's those who wish to select those groups in society, very large groups, and treat them as something that needs to be stamped out, whether that be through violence, whether that be through some horrific Nazi-esque segregation, that's something which proves much more dangerous. It inspires open hatred, not one that is simply on cultural, economic factors, one based on who you are, on factors that are out of your control. So, and then we can look, I've already explained what the goals of white nationalists are, and as I said, I'm happy to conflate it with the term Nazis given the definition given by the first speaker.
On that point?
Nope. So we can look at Antifa's goals. And as it was defined, it's an organisation in the United States which is there to end fascism. It's been done in very poor ways. It has been done through violence. It has been done through riots. But as I'm sure others will go through, it's conducted in other ways. It's conducted through providing aid in hurricanes, through community work, because ending fascism is something that can be done in a positive way that is constructive for society.
On that one?
Unless there are some very radical views held by the proposition, I don't believe that there's a good way to build a white ethno-state in a way that properly serves all people. Now, we were talking about earlier if this is about movements or not individuals, and the fact is that whether we're talking about white nationalists or whether or not we're talking about Antifa, there is no unified message, but there is a more unified message on that of the white nationalist side. And when the unity of their message is assessed, it's very clear that theirs is the one which is more dangerous in a mainstream way. The white nationalists have figureheads. They have people who are rallied behind, be that in real life, be that like Richard Spencer, who was mentioned, highly prolific figures, the likes of Milo Yiannopoulos, who are not the complete Nazis who I talk of, who are not the KKK, those groups which are also part of white nationalism, but still ones which reach a very large audience. Antifa does not have those figures. It is not inspiring the same number of people to hate, to loathe, and to clamour for this society which resembles something not too dissimilar from that of Adolf Hitler. And they are given a much larger platform on the mainstream news websites in a way that Antifa is not. And because Antifa, and this is when we assess how they're handled in the media, Antifa is looked very poorly on by the media, and because it doesn't have the same prolific figures, is ignored in the mainstream discourse. And that lack of presence means it's not as dangerous as the white nationalist movement is. So what is Antifa, and what is a white nationalist? What are the white nationalists, and why are they more dangerous? Because what they want is to segregate and deny the rights of so many of those in our society, and Antifa do not want the same goals. A goal which is in its own way righteous, though poorly executed, but one which can serve people. It's very clear that the white nationalists are more dangerous than Antifa, which is an ineffectual organisation that can do good things as well as bad. So I hope you all oppose the motion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Leader of the Opposition. And now to continue the case for the proposition, we have what my device informs me is a government minister, Mr. James Beckett.
My government, my opposition, judges, president, secretariat, and members of the House. There have been many good points made tonight, though I'd like to begin with dealing with the opposition's idea that Antifa has done good things. That this is an ineffectual, mostly nice organisation that really wants to get rid of fascism in America. So quaint. What fascism in America? I mean, seriously, we're talking about one of the most powerful democratic countries in the world. The idea that there's some secret fascist organisation running the place is ludicrous. And where are they running it from, I ask you? Well, according to Antifa, they're running it from American universities. They're attacking white students, white professors, for spouting an ideology which is liberal. These people are mad. Now, if I turned to you and said, burn their cities, who would you think I was quoting? Well, I'm quoting Antifa. And when they say burn their cities, they mean burn the white people's cities. That was the message from Antifa members in the BLM march. When we look at something like Occupy Wall Street, a peaceful protest that was incredibly important to us, it was Antifa, the black bloc, that turned up and burnt down banks. My wonderful companions tonight have brought up the fact that they're recognised as terrorist organisations, because they are.
On that point, there's a big difference between burn those cities and lynch those bad people.
Thank you, but
Which is more dangerous.
well, I'd ask you to name one white supremacist who said that within the last 10 years, because there isn't one. It's Antifa who is advocating violence, not the current white nationalist movement. Now, let's get something clear. We're not defending the white nationalists, but right now their biggest crime is they're morons. They want a white ethno-state. It's financially, ethically, economically, politically completely ludicrous. These people are scared. And why are they scared? Why is it growing? Because, as my companions have pointed out, Antifa has stirred up this aggression. When Trump was elected, one of the key arguments from right-wing media was the irony: the left has given us this victory. They were the ones that made people so scared in white working class backgrounds that they voted for a lunatic painting himself orange. Antifa are more dangerous than the white nationalist movement. They're the ones who disrupted the G20 events and burnt down people's homes, their houses, their cars. Not government property, private property, the property of the people, the very people they purport to defend. But unless you are an anarchist, or a communist, or a socio-feminist, Antifa doesn't care about you. Antifa cares about violence. And, much like we saw in pre-Nazi Germany, one of the biggest dangers with movements like this is the argument between communism and fascism. Now, one of the reasons that Hitler was able to rise was communist movements within Germany during this period were very powerful, very violent, and very aggressive.
On that point,
yeah, go ahead.
The largest communist rebellion in Germany took place in 1919 and was immediately
I'm getting
crushed.
to that. The reason it was immediately crushed was because they were all liberal students. The fascist movements aren't. They're incredibly dangerous, incredibly strong movements, but they are encouraged by this attack on their political ideologies. When right-wing movements tend to have a political platform, as we see in Austria, for example, where an admittedly very far-right party has just been elected, violence actually tends to decrease, not increase. But when we look at sort of far-left movements, like, for instance, the ones that arose in 1917 in post-revolutionary Russia, that caused a massive civil war and led to millions of deaths, far outweighing Hitler's. Stalin was one of the worst war criminals in history, one of the worst public criminals in history. And yet we always turn to the Nazis and say, were they terrible? But we don't want to engage with the Russians at all.
Bearing in mind that Stalin was in control of a massive country, whereas Antifa are in control of a bunch of Twitter accounts, you obviously make such a grandiose comparison and claim it as intellectually honest.
I mean, I'm not sure what world you live in, but in my world, Twitter accounts don't burn down houses, shops, and government buildings. But, I mean, obviously, if all they're in charge of is Twitter accounts, then what danger could they possibly be? Well, I mean, the argument I'd make is that's all the white nationalist movement is now. That's all my monopolis is. And if we go further back, before the rise of Antifa, you're looking at people like Ben Shapiro. And the worst thing Ben Shapiro ever did was call a transsexual a man, because he's an arse. As most of them are. The point is, Antifa... Yeah, go ahead.
Your speech has focused solely on those who are more moderate within the white nationalist movement. You've ignored the literal hate organisations, those who do call for the lynchings, the complete extermination of minority groups. And your ignorance of that tells me that you're trying to do that to mitigate the fact that in the long term such organisations, with their goals, as well as their methods and their organisation, is more dangerous to society and likely to engage with those facets of the white nationalist movement.
I'd argue that those are actually on the decline as more moderate voices move in and lead the white nationalist movement. If we were talking about Germany in the 19th 30s, I'd agree with you. If we are talking about other white nationalist movements within Europe post that period, I'd agree with you. But the fact is, we're not seeing that violence from the white nationalist movements anymore. We're seeing a very different message spread through YouTube, spread through Facebook, spread through all kinds of modern media, because they are engaging in the conversation. And as the editor of Breitbart pointed out on a talk show, we want to use the old left's tactics because they have abandoned them. Antifa has abandoned those tactics. They have merely turned into what the Nazis always wanted to be. The white nationalist movement is not as dangerous as Antifa, and we must recognise that for our society. I urge you to support the motion.
Government member, and now to continue the case for the opposition, give a warm welcome to opposition member, Ms. Tara Grace Connolly.
I just want to clarify as well, as I do, it's approximately 12 o'clock today. So. I want to address a few points made by the proposition tonight so far, particularly one Inma said, which was the short and long-term impact of the white nationalist movement and Antifa, which was this whole idea of the dangerous tactics of Antifa and the violence, and oh god, it's terrible burning down houses. What is terrible to me, in my opinion, coming from the opposition, is the normalisation of white nationalism. And to me, violence taken aside, the fact that white nationalism has become something that is almost semi-palatable, something that can have its own music festivals, something that can have people wearing Confederate ugly square nails on their fingers, that you can almost sort of make that terrible ideology permeate into society and make it something that is kind of acceptable. It's actually as scary as someone burning down houses. Also, Sullivan said about punching a Nazi. Hi Sullivan. About punching a Nazi, if we're going to get into the semantics of what's more violent, what's more dangerous, punching a Nazi is a far more limited group of people than punching white women. No, thank you. So if we're going to get into the pickiness about how many people are going to be impacted by the violence, that'll be significantly less.
At that point,
2 seconds, please. Kieran also said at one point about how the mask and how it's dangerous, all these faceless people mobbing the streets. I don't see how it's because somebody wears a mask that makes them intrinsically more scary than people who feel brave enough and bold enough to just take a city like Charlottesville with tiki torches and not even feel embarrassed about the fact that they are just storming a city and wishing upon people. But nonetheless. So that is essentially where I'm wanting to come with this. We are not in any way advocating Antifa as a perfect organisation. That is not the case. They are violent in cases, they are extreme in cases, as are the white nationalist movements. But I do. 2 seconds. I am losing my train of thought entirely.
Can I ask a point? Since you didn't give me any points of information, I just want to clarify something and ask you something as well, and relate it into the long and short impact. So, you say anti-fascism can be done in a good way, not in a bad way. My question is, doesn't that make anti-fascism more dangerous because the fight against the fascism is being declined, underrated? The anti-fascism are more dangerous because they're taking away all that credit fighting fascism, but they're not doing it in a good way, so it's more dangerous. That's what I'm asking you to think that or not. I can say that more.
Please do not.
Okay. So,
please.
Okay, anti-fascism, it's more dangerous because it's actually a weapon that they're using against fascism, which is taking credit of the weapon itself because it's so destructive. So, therefore, it's more dangerous in the long term because it's the only way to fight fascism. You know?
Okay. Just as well, I hear what you're saying, and I just don't agree. But
what?
I just don't. I think, in terms of what I've been saying about the fascist movement and whatever it is and what it represents, and how Antifa, again, I did not get to explain properly, are not a perfect organisation. We do not advocate the violence that Antifa promote. But what we can say is Antifa have also been part of Hurricane Harvey relief efforts. When was the last time you've seen nationalist movements come out in full force to support other communities? Again, Antifa have links to communism and egalitarianism, which, although we do not promote the methods, and this needs to be said over and over again because there was
sort of insinuation by Mr. Beck at one point that we said that we loved Antifa, which we do not. But that the crux of Antifa is to create an egalitarian playing field for all people, and that means bringing down those from higher positions of white nationalist power down to the level of other people. Essentially.
Now back.
Golly. Essentially, Antifa is a less defined movement, as I said earlier on by Hugh and by Kira. There's not the figureheads that come with the white nationalist movements. Therefore, they can't organise to the extent to create such violence and such havoc upon people. To me, they have seemed less staged because they are less informed. They are smaller pocket groups that cannot do the same extent of damage as people that have credibility, that are able to sort of inform and sway public opinion and social movements. So I do think that...
I see what you mean about them being less influential with anonymity and everything else, but they're still the ones burning down cities.
And I want to bring back my point I said earlier on. I do not advocate violence, but I don't know what is more dangerous. You can burn down violence, you can burn down houses and buildings in short-term consequences, or you can create this permeating perception in society that people are less important than other people, and that will continue an ongoing cycle of subjugation and oppression of other races, which leads to things like ghetto communities, which leads to higher rates of violence because those communities are being crushed by the system that white nationalism was protected by. Essentially. Thank you. I haven't much else to say about this, other than I don't think that Antifa have the same level of clout as white nationalism because they aren't supported by that system. Antifa is smaller satellite groups that aren't able to collectively come together like white nationalists and have that support and normalisation. Antifa are seen as these men in masks and these terror figures, whereas white nationalist communities are able to go about their lives and celebrate their white nationalist pride, and that is seen as okay, that is seen as normalising communities. And I haven't much else to say, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Government Member. And now to close the case to the proposition, please give a warm welcome to the Government Whip, Mr. Matthew Sullivan HLM.
Esteemed Chairman, Honourable Judges, gentle beings. I'm going to begin my speech by going over the main points of the proposition that's put forward during this debate. And my second section is going to be essentially outlining what I believe to be the three primary points of clash in this debate and why I believe that we win in these points of clash. First proposition begins by pointing out that while there are many specific cases, I say many, like a handful, of white nationalists being violent, such as Anders Breivik in Norway, or that guy that ran over somebody in Charlottesville. Charleston? I don't remember the name of the town. That one, there was that big rally. Anyway. Yeah, I know. The point is that while there are these specific incidents, Antifa is universally violent and they seek to achieve their goals through violence. No, thank you. They then talk about the short and long-term impacts of this. Short term, we have direct harms being caused to society by damage to property, assault of people, stalking of journalists, so on and so forth. But then, more insidiously, the long-term impacts on all of society. And that is that Antifa drives moderates rightwards. Antifa don't actually do anything for the left, and in fact, their methods in invoking this fear amongst the moderate or central right populace are actively harming the cause of progress and leftism inside. Second prop goes on to talk about how white nationalists, while again their views are deplorable, many of them, and I'd say most of their figureheads, they don't wear masks. Most of them actually advocate non-violence because they know that they can't get away with being the brown shirts like Antifa try to be. Which actually comes on to second op's point about how Antifa, how white nationalists wish they could be the brown shirts. I'm sure some of them wish they do. It's just that that they're not, and they'll never get away with that, whereas Antifa literally are. No, thank you. Second prop continues to talk about specific incidents of, well, many incidents of how Antifa has caused direct harms to people, such as the stalking and physical assault of journalists on both sides of the Atlantic. Third prop then talks about how, essentially again, Antifa pushes people to the right. There's not really any significant fascist movement in America, and while Antifa's goals might be to end fascism, there's not really any fascism to end, which means that when they try to oppose things like white nationalism by such ridiculously violent methods, it seems disproportionate to people, and what that does is, again, it drives people to the right. They took the Occupy movement, for example, which was essentially a large peaceful protest against Wall Street and how the rich people in society are downtreading the poorest. And Antifa took that and turned it into riots. And they basically ruined the whole thing and destroyed the core message of what was originally going to be quite a useful protest. And now that I've gone over our points, I'm going to talk about our three main points of clash. First is Ops belief. The ends of Antifa justify the means. They claim that white nationalists want, for example, to put down people of other races and other cultures, and that's bad, whereas Antifa wants to create some sort of egalitarian society, which is good. But intentions don't matter. Outcomes matter. And Antifa's outcomes are bad. Their short-term goals are to cause physical harm to all society. Their long-term actual actions and their long-term effects cause damage to progress in society. Yes.
And when you compare that to the long-term actual goals and consequences of a white nationalist organisation, which is quite literally the subjugation of entire races, and that,
I take your point, please.
Unlike Antifa, being
point. Yeah, no, you've missed my point, actually. Because, again, what I'm saying is intent doesn't matter. Outcomes do. White nationalists aren't going to get this white ethnic state. People won't stand for it. Whereas Antifa, they're not going to get their egalitarian society either. Because again, what they do in the short term is cause physical harm to people, and in the long term is cause societal harms by driving moderates and centre-right people, no thank you, to the hard right. Antifa have caused this right-wing resurgence that we've seen in the past 5 years. Because when Antifa became very, very active around about 2010, it was only about 2 or 3 years after that we saw this massive right-wing resurgence, which is, for example, why Donald Trump has been elected. The alt-right is a result of Antifa's long-term harms to society and driving people to the right. And thank you. The second main point of clash is the Ops belief is that Antifas will achieve their goal, to end fascism. Well, again, as I've said, no, they won't. First of all, Antifa are fascists. They seek to stifle all debate, and their actions, again, as I've said, are really evocative of Hitler's brown shirts. They attack people based on ideology. They won't end fascism because they are causing people to be driven towards the right. They are dangerous in that they make the right wing more and more dangerous. The right wing currently isn't. They could be, because Antifa is causing this danger, and that is why I think we can lay that danger on Antifa. The third main point of clash, and I'm going to try and make this quickly because I don't have any time left, is that Opp claims that because the right-wing nationalist movements are worse, like, say, the Nazis. No. Our point on prop is that violent right-wing movements are no longer ubiquitous. We don't have actual Nazis anymore. Antifa exists in a society where there are no more fascists to kill, and they're just driving people to become real fascists again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Government Whip. And now, to conclude the case of the opposition and indeed the debate, can we please welcome the opposition whip, Mr. Jake Karen.
I'll say that this has been an interesting debate, and I'd like to commend all speakers on either side, both the proposition and the opposition, for providing a very interesting Dufferin competition. However, I must note that one of the greatest arguments made against Antifa by the proposition is that they are in fact not good enough at their jobs. They are not defeating white nationalism at the moment, and this is somehow bad. It makes them worse. I would argue that, yes, on occasion their violence has provided a justification for white nationalists. However, I would argue that we are still treating white nationalism as an endgame bad scenario under this paradigm. I would argue that we are saying that even though Antifa may be contributing to the rights of the rights, which I don't believe is simple enough to state. I believe socioeconomic factors must be considered there. Even though we're saying they're causing this rise, that still acknowledges that the problem is primarily with white nationalism.
On that point. But that's the thing, when we take the definition of the motion, as our first speaker pointed out, it's not that motion isn't anti-fascism is more dangerous than white nationalism. It is that Antifa are more dangerous than white nationalists. These groups are worse.
Actually, I totally disagree there. I believe that the Antifa on the ground are much less dangerous than, and as a movement, are much less dangerous than the white nationalists on the ground. Most recently, we've seen, you have brought up how inherently violent Antifa is often in their rhetoric, and I'll be honest, I dislike political violence. I think it's unproductive, and I don't like violent rhetoric. However, for all this, how many people can we actually list as having been killed by Antifa?
On that point.
We can, in fact, link the alt-right one moment to many deaths, including all of those at Charlottesville, where a member of the alt-right slammed right into a crowd of Antifa protesters, not even Antifa, I believe, just generally moderate leftists, and also into to the not Charlottesville, the Florida shooting recently. Nicholas Cruz was linked to a white nationalist group.
Nicholas Cruz was never linked to a white nationalist group. That's a 4chan conspiracy and being confirmed. That was one death from a guy slamming his car into a protester. As for Antifa, you're counting, I believe, in 2015, it was 7 law enforcement officials. In multiple countries in Hamburg, there have been multiple injuries and casualties, and as damage accelerates, you have these leftists, you have Antifa groups even attacking migrant groups that are coming towards Europe, and they consider have too much of a fascist agenda as they're coming through Turkey.
I cannot testify as to the activities of Antifa in Europe. However, I will argue that the law enforcement officers you're probably speaking about died in larger scale riots, which, as we've established here, Antifa are a minority group. Those riots were also part of the disenfranchised black community, and generally it's hard to pin those groups on Antifa members, especially considering just how loosely movement it is. Point of clash number 2, the lack of an actual fascist movement in America, as testified by Mr. Sullivan. Might I remind him that the motion focuses on white nationalism and not on fascism? The two are often interlinked. However, I would say there is a distinction to be made. Also, it's generally bad PR to identify yourself as explicitly white nationalist or as fascist. Sorry.
My point was, again, that it's mostly opposition saying that Antifa are going to stop the Nazis. Yeah, no. We don't think that white nationalists are Nazis. We think Nazis are really, really bad. White nationalists are only pretty, really bad.
I'd argue that, yeah, they are pretty really bad, especially considering their stance on the possession of guns. Antifa generally tends to support the abolition of the right to possess arms, whereas there are multiple examples of white nationalist militias possessing assault rifles and who would be much more capable of violence in the event of a hypothetical civil war than Antifa, who, as we've established before, at most can produce petrol bombs and beat up protesters. Also, Antifa did indeed achieve their goal once before. they achieved it in 1950s Britain, wherein there was a resurgence of fascism. However, regrettably, through political violence, they were able to break up these rallies and plunge the National Front back into obscurity, where they remain to this day. Sorry.
So, the thing is, like, as I said before in my speech, we're talking about movements and we're not talking about individuals. It could be true, I'm not certainly sure that in Britain, like, the Antifas is like a major goal, but the specific case of Spain, as I said before, the long-term impact that the Antifas had within the fight against fascism, it's very bad because they only get back press into the fight against the fascism. What do you think, what opposition thinks about that? That's why they want the interest.
I think you do make an interesting point. However, I would argue that Antifa, as a movement, did achieve their goal. It was much more organised back in the 1950s than it even is today. And I would argue it's not very organised today, but was back then. My point is, I would like to make in response to that, is that Antifa has made a concerted effort to promote the images of white nationalists at demonstrations such as Charlottesville, and I'll be honest, that did much more to turn me away from white nationalists than any act of violence by Antifa has thus far. The images of hundreds of men gathered with torches in park, raising their fists in the air, advocating ethno-state is much more chilling than some Egypt with a bike clock. So, in conclusion, the arguments we have made in this debate have been primarily from an ideological, practical and a cultural perspective. We have argued that it is generally quite hard to argue that Antifa is an organised movement that deserves our scorn as much as the white nationalist movement, where there are indeed organised militias who are armed, and also that there's a lack of mainstream recognition of these groups, whereas there are links between the Republican Party and white nationalists on a grassroots level. As such, I thank you for your time. Happy Dufferin, everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Officer Whip, and thank you to all our speakers. The judges would now like to make their way to a judging room of their choosing. Best of luck to you. So, we will now, as per usual, move on to a round of questions. So, are there any questions for the proposition? Being this side, right here. I'll start with Mr. Jack Patton.
You made the point that the white nationalists, alt-right, fascists, and people at the word I don't really follow that with, will never achieve their aim, because society will not stand for it. Surely Antifa is a symptom of society not standing for it. There are people violently standing up and saying, no, go away, you're going to happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patton. Who from the proposition would care to respond? Mr. Beckett.
The resurgence of the white nationalist movement occurred after Antifa activity really hit its peak. I don't really, I guess, agree with this idea that society is somehow standing against something, or Antifa is in response to something. Antifa, especially when we look at university campuses, it has many of its roots there, unless somehow you'd like to argue that Antifa was fighting some secret fascist or white nationalist movement within American liberal arts colleges. I don't really think that's true in the slightest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckett. Would anyone from the opposition care to respond? You don't need to, but the option is there. Mr. Kieran.
I would argue that the activity of Antifa during that period that the Honourable Gentleman mentions was actually very low level. They at the very worst threatened someone's freedom of speech by trying to campaign against them. I am not aware of much instances of actual violence in the period between 2010 and, let's say, 2015. So to argue that that's somehow, in this window of 2 years, led to a massive rise in the activities, I think that's intellectually dishonest. I think Antifa can often be a nuisance and are used as an argument by the pro-freedom of speech crowd. However, I do believe that other factors are to blame for the rise of the alt-right and the white nationalist movements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kerr. Are there any questions now for the opposition? I'll take Mr. McDonald.
So there's a particular kind of taste of hatred for anti-fascist, for fascist movements, and I feel like that. There's a particular bad taste, hatred for fascist movements, and on that kind of basis, I would say that it's much more likely for Antifa to be elected in some sort of way. Would that not mean that they are more, since both sides kind of agree tonight that they're both kind of dangerous? Does that not mean that Antifa are more dangerous than...
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Dufferin to respond.
Yeah, no. As I mentioned in my speech, there's much more acceptance within the mainstream media of a white nationalist movement than that of Antifa, as Tara went into detail in her speech. Whenever the basically KKK did march through a city wearing tiki torches, the Fox Newses and the, again, Republican administrations of the world refused to condemn it. That's the world we live in, is that when these organisations of hate are marching on the white nationalist side, there isn't the same level of condemnation we should. We should, in the sake of public order, and a constitutionally permitted public order in many right-thinking nations, that we say when there is such a disrupt to public order, to common decency which is accepted in the social contract for everyone who lives within it, that we do condemn it. And the fact that it isn't instantly in these cases is quite frankly a disgrace. And when we compare that to the actions of Antifa, they don't receive that same condemnation from pretty much all sides, except for the extremely small sects of the radical left, mostly within campuses. Despite their actions, it doesn't have that same coverage and does not have nearly the same level of support. So in regards to your question, John, no, I believe you're entirely wrong.
Thank you very much. Let's work to respond to the proposition.
First of all, I agree with John, yeah. Both of them can be actually dangerous. The thing is why? Because the main question of this motion is why on this side of the proposition, why Antifas are more dangerous, and it's very simple. They're talking about social issues, they're talking about political issues, they're talking about how the white movement can lead to people to believe that other people are bad. Well, the thing is in a long term, that it's something that can be changed. Meanwhile, when we're talking about the Antifas, we're talking about a movement that is actually fighting against fascism, and they're not doing it in a good way. So the movement itself, it's being wrong. They're just making a battle that they can win, and they're just making people think that there's nothing to fight against. So that's why we think that the Antifas are more dangerous within other arguments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burkins. Are there any points now abstaining on the motion that can be directed equally to both sides? I'll take Mr. Hubble.
Thank you. I reckon I'll regret seeing
Seductive.
I'd just like to get the opinion, might be a bit controversial, but you both seem to have taken the side that violence is bad. I'll be a stickler. But in all sorts of civil rights movements, and even more historically back, the rights that oppressed people have received has usually been obtained through peaceful protest and through violence. I do not advocate violence, but I'd like to get both of your sides' opinion on direct action in terms of destruction of property is actually an incredibly powerful tool to bring in people to the table.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hubble. I'll ask the proposition to respond first this time, and just while I remember, I'll ask the op to respond first next time to the abstaining question. But Mr. Sullivan to respond.
I agree with about half of that, because I think that peaceful protest is the strongest tool in the arsenal of anybody who wishes to change society. Violence really isn't. What happens when you use violence to change society is you get reaction. All too often, let's take, I don't know, now I'm trying to think of examples and I'm blanking, but essentially, when you try to use violence to change the system pushes back, and it pushes back hard. Whereas if you use peaceful protest and you get people onto your side, then everyone working together can create that change. But again, when you use violence, all you do is you push people away, and you push people who might otherwise have been sympathetic to your cause far, far away from it. which is why I believe that Antifa is incredibly bad, especially for the left, because it pushes people to the hard right.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sullivan, next one. Who from the op would care to respond?
I'll respond.
Mr. Carey.
Well, I would agree on the point that violence generally doesn't get us what we want. We've seen that time and again in Irish history. I believe, for example, the 1798 rebellion. We had a parliament before that, but afterwards, went to London. However, most important, I do feel a distinction needs to be made. The threat of violence has often been useful for social change. It's allowed various figures in progressive movements to point to a boogeyman to allow themselves to be presented as the only reasonable option. For example, Martin Luther King did this with Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. Was able to point at their policy of black ethno-states and say, look at how ridiculous and dangerous this is. We are the only ones you can really work with. Please, give some ground. So I would say that the threat of violence is often useful. However, I would say that its actual application is often damaging.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carey. Are there any questions now for the proposition? Mr. McSparrow.
First of all, I missed out involved in this debate, so I'm not really familiar with your arguments that have been made.
We appreciate your honesty.
You seem to be going against this idea that violence cannot motivate political change, which historically speaking is not the case. If you look at South Africa under apartheid, there was much violence committed to actually change the system. If you look at countless other states, violence has been used as a political tool to actually affect the change. You can imagine if Hitler, if everyone had sat down and given a petition saying don't invade, the fascist of all time, you wouldn't have President Hitler or something like that. So the point I'm trying to make is that violence can be used as a political tool. I mean, if you look in the 1950s in London, as mentioned previously, whenever the fascist resurgence happened, violence is what broke it up. So to say that violence isn't a legitimate political tool, whenever, quite frankly, sometimes it can be used, sometimes the means justifies the...
Briefly, Mr. McSparrow.
The point still stands there that sometimes violence can be used as a legitimate political tool, so criticising Antifa for its use of violence is maybe not the best idea.
That's what I'm just doing.
Thank you very much. Mr. McSparrow, by proxy, Mr. Hubble. Mr. Gallagher to lend respond.
I don't think any of us quite said that violence, well, okay, actually, just some did, that violence can change society, but very rarely is it required to change it in a beneficial way. The second part of your question, which, would you mind clarifying the end of it again, please?
Much better,
Right, okay. No, I better.
Yeah, that's
Thank you, that was it. Yeah, it's just like these. Well, consider Antifa's ends. They to destroy fascism. Yes. How exactly you destroy fascism by means of fascism, I don't know. But the end of their argument is to clearly, if they're at least even half aware of where the end of all this is some sort of left-wing egalitarian utopia that cannot possibly exist, because utopias never can. What they're also looking for the end of is any debate from any extreme right-wing point of view, which is always the silencing of any extreme leads to the growth of that extreme. If that's what they want, they're doing a great job of doing it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher. Tell anyone from the the op care to respond?
Sorry, they're not doing a very good job.
You don't need to, but the option's there. No? Going once? Going twice? Okay, that's fine. Any questions now for the opposition? Mr. Doherty.
Can I ask like a specific person?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you anyway. Okay, so the fourth speaker, the opposition whip, I appear. He spoke about the National Front and the fact that ever since the 1950s it's been in decline. The reason why it's been in decline is because in the 1980s a large section of it was sort of fractured off and formed to the British National Party. So I'd like to ask the opposition whip if he felt that using the current methods of Antifa, like blowing up houses, on the terms what the IRA.
Jesus.
Whether he would support those current methods to be used to destroy the BNP as a white, and whether we consider that as a white nationalist movement to destroy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Doherty, and a commendation to you, sir, for following proper parliamentary procedure and asking your question through the chair and not directly to the speaker. Good on you. Mr. Cairn, your son.
I didn't even notice that.
Well, perhaps a slightly loaded question, but as I've said before, I do not advocate those methods of violence. So yeah.
I like it. Would anybody from the proposition care to crack up a cult? I mean, sorry, respond. Mr. Beckett.
I think I understood your question. If you're talking about using, when you talk about the BNP, I mean, I'm surprised at your age you even know they existed, because they certainly don't now. But the fact is, this is a good example of actual engagement by far-right groups into our political system. And one of the reasons that's important is because the BNP were crazy, and the voters told them so, and the parliamentary debates told them so. And that kind of use of dialogue is so important when we're engaging people who are crazy. When it comes to issues with Antifa, there's no engagement, there's just violence. And that both feeds into the alt-right message, the white nationalist movement message, that they're being oppressed, that they're being attacked, that white people are being attacked, and both feeds Antifa's needs to continue to be anonymous because they can't go into politics, even the way that the IRA was able to, because no one knows who they are, because they don't show themselves. Not out of anything other than the fact that many of these people just want to commit acts of violence.
Thank you, Mr. Beckett. Are there any questions now? Just standing on the motion, Mr. Connor. And I'll ask the author to respond first this time, don't forget.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very quick note, Mr. Dalton, in your protected minute, it was protected and you didn't answer my question. You conflated the idea of Hitler's ideology with white nationalism. I think that's a rank inaccuracy of history. I think about 99% of Hitler's enemies and dead that lie after World War II were white. Jewish people, Catholics, Slavs, all white. So I think the conflation of white nationalism and Hitler's ideology is just so inaccurate, it's unreal. And I get that this wasn't off in only 15 minutes. I thought I'd address that. On an abstaining point, I don't want any of these liberals sort of like, oh, both are bad. We know they're both bad. Can we put out a hypothetical? What is more dangerous? The creation of a peaceful white ethnic state, or communism, which is what Antifa argue for, and what would replace fascism and what would replace the government structure of capitalism that they wish to turn out? Which is worse and more dangerous?
Thank you very much, Mr. Connell. Interesting question. Who from the opposition would care to respond? Mr. Hugh Dobbin.
It was directed to me initially, so I feel like, no, I stand entirely by what I said in the protected minute. What I said when I mean that I'm comfortable conflating the terms is that it's important to recognise that the Nazis living today within society are an important and integral facet of the white nationalist movement, and I wouldn't want the proposition to be able to distance their involvement from it. So I stand by my statement in that regard. And in regards to the other point of view made, if I were to choose between a white ethno state and communism, I choose communism.
Someone remember that next year. Come in handy. Who from the proposition would care to respond? Mr. Matthew Solomon, HLM.
This leads into part of why I really don't like Antifa. Because, yeah, no, I agree with you. If it came down to the creation of a white ethnic state, was communism. Hell yeah, communism. I love communism.
Well, point of clarity. I didn't ask you, I didn't ask you what you would choose. I asked you what would be more dangerous.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, white ethnic state would end communism.
Yeah.
But that's why I don't like Antifa. Because they're not going to achieve communism. They're just going to drive people to think they're being attacked. And that, frankly, Antifa, their outcomes are probably more closely aligned creation of white ethno state, because they're working towards that by driving people to the right and to fascism.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. I think that'll do it. 2 rounds of questions sounds good. The judges have now returned. I do have on the order paper that Dr. Miller would be announcing the winner. I assume that because he was the winner last year. Ms. Vetter, are you the head judge this evening?
Yeah, that's alright. I mean,
I could. Lily's got.
Yeah, do what you want to ignore the order paper. So just before
who lies?
Just before the announcement of the winner, we shall take a quick vote on speaker ability, because may as well. It's not binding this time, it does not determine the winner, but we may as well for the records. So, I would ask you please to fiddle about with your membership cards, although actually there's so few people here today that I know who is a member and who isn't, so it's not particularly important. What do you... Oh yeah, speaking at the end about that. You don't need to worry about your membership cards. If you're not a member, please don't put your hand up. Just please, honest and all that. You've technically paid, so yeah, you're fine. Right, so the motion this evening is: this House believes Antifa are more dangerous than the white nationalist movements. This is a vote on speaker ability. If you believe that the proposition spoke better on the motion this evening, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Mr. Secretary.
Yes.
Very good. All those who believe that the opposition spoke better this evening, please raise your hand and say nay. Nay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Mr. Secretary. 10. You got 10. Sorry, put your hands up again. Hands up again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ah, 10. Applause. And all those who believe that both sides spoke equally well, equally clearly, or wish to express no opinion on the matter whatsoever, please raise your hand, say it loud, say it proud, say meh! Meh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Oh,
Secretary. Mr. Secretary, please read back the vote.
The vote reads 7 for the motion, 10 against the motion, and 12 abstentions.
We're going to the abstentions have it, the abstentions have it. Thank you very much to the House and to our speakers this evening. Special thanks to Ms. Chloe Ferguson, Outreach Officer-elect, for having the photographs this evening. Without further ado, can we please give a warm welcome to Training Officer and Honorary-elect Member and Head Judge this evening, Ms. Lily Oliver!
Right, I'm going to keep it brief because it's like 9:30. I'm going to give you a few wee bits of feedback. Don't take them personally. If you want more, don't take it personally. If you want more feedback, come and talk to us. We all had our own opinions, but we all came to a relatively not that unanimous decision. So firstly, guys, defining the motion. You didn't do it. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. We're reading the whole debate, and it doesn't mean that your speeches weren't good individually, but you needed to define it in a much more clear way, okay? Because it makes it a lot harder for everyone else. Who was that?
Silence from the gallery.
Sorry. Teamwork. None of you referred to anyone else in your team. It was more like you two were the closest team, and you weren't in a team. So next time, just bear in mind, even if you just say, the next speaker is going to say, it's just a nice thing, it rounds it up, it just makes it a lot easier for us as judges to be like, oh, they've actually recognised what the person before or after them has said. It's so much better. Right, okay. We ended up voting on this by who had played to their position the best at the end of the day. There was people who had really strong arguments but didn't necessarily play to their positions, and that's not to say that there weren't amazing speeches from each and every one of you, okay? But in the end, we came to the decision that Matthew Sullivan won. James did have an amazingly strong argument, and we were really, really struggling. But like, it was fantastic. Yeah, but like, he did play up to his position the best, and I hope you all agree with us. You probably don't, because you don't know how to do this.
Commiserations to all of our fine speakers for this evening. We should all be immeasurably proud. I believe that justified does it. We shall be retiring to woodworkers this evening. If the speakers could remain behind for photograph, especially with someone. But the time is now 25:10. I do hereby